nation of Judah is going to follow her older sister. Now, my friends, for us as Americans, we have an older sister. Our older sister is Europe. I don't know about you. Do you want to end up like Greece? Is that how we want to end up financially, like Greece? Because that's the road that we're headed on. Do you want to end up like France and how Europe is? That's not how I want to live. In fact, my ancestors came to this country to live a different life. And you know what that life was? To have a Christian nation. A nation that was ruled by what is right. So if my people, the Lord says, who are called by my name, will humble themselves and pray. But I want to tell you something. It is critical. And if we as a nation do not get off this road, we're about to run off a cliff. Just like Israel did. And just like Judah is going to do. Now, you know how long Israel lasted? About 250 years. Does that ring a bell to anyone? My friends, do you realize that public education in this country, the very first textbook in public education was the Bible? Do you realize that for decade after decade after decade, I think over 100 years, the McGuffey reader was used as the standard of education. And the McGuffey reader was full of scriptures. If our founding fathers thought that was a problem, they would have dealt with it way back there. Not in the 1950s, when a very liberal Supreme Court justice made an arbitrary decision in the separation of church and state, of which our Constitution does not have. We're never going to force anyone to be a Christian. But I want to tell you something else. I got a copy of, I think it was, somewhere around 1880s, 8th grade graduation test for Topeka, Kansas. Now, mind you, one-room schools with a woman teaching 25 kids, 1st grade through 8th grade. And this test, there isn't a one of you in this room could pass. Not one of you. In fact, a person graduating from Harvard today couldn't pass that test. How is it possible that out of a one-room school with a bunch of dirt farmers, they were able to pass these tests? I'll tell you why. Because they focused on what's real and true and fact, and not on social indoctrination and trying to raise up an entire generation that believes the lies of the ideology that they want to believe. And my friends, now we have an education system. We spend more money than any country in the world, and we're failing miserably. The answer is not more money. The answer is a nation turning back its heart to the Lord and teaching our kids what is really true. We can change this country again. You're going to get me fired up here. Okay, we better get back to where I am. If I could remember where I was, we'd do that. All right, we are in 2 Kings chapter 17, verse number 19. Also, Judah did not keep the commandments of the Lord their God, but they walked in the statutes which Israel made. And so from here on, he's going to recount a little bit of history, even of the civil war where Jeroboam became the first king of the northern kingdom called Israel. And it says, for the children of Israel, in verse 22, had walked in all the sins of Jeroboam, which he did, and did not depart from them, until the Lord removed Israel out of his sight, as he had said by all his servants, the prophets. So Israel was carried away from their own land to Assyria, as it is to this day. Now, beginning in verse number 24, Israel has now been conquered by Assyria. And these next verses, which I'm going to let you read on your own, lays out how the king of Assyria deported the vast majority of people out of Israel, out of Samaria, and he imported other people that he had conquered from other places. Now fast forward to the time of Jesus. It's very interesting. When we go to Israel today, there's a lot of lines that are exactly the same. In Bible times, all the land in the bottom part of the coastland was the Philistines. That's Gaza today. Never ever been there. And the area in the Bible at Jesus' time that was called Samaria is the West Bank today. Still, we go around the West Bank when we go to Israel. It's kind of funny, the layout. But why did the Jews go around Samaria? Because here's what happened. Assyria conquers Israel. They deport them all. They haul in other people. The people intermarry. The few Jews that are left are now half-breeds with other people. Judah falls some years later. They're hauled off to Babylon. But the Jews come back from Babylon. Thus they remain their pure ethnic identity. So by the time of Jesus, the Samaritans, the Jews couldn't stand them. They were half-breeds. That's why in John chapter 4, Jesus, as he's going through Samaria, and he stops and he asks a Samaritan woman for water. And she goes, "What, you a Jew? What are you even doing here? And you're asking me, a Samaritan, for some water to drink?" And of course, that wonderful discourse of John chapter 4 that we lay out there. Now, fast forward to today. After that period of time, the Samaritans would not marry outside of themselves. Thus today, if you can believe it, on a mountain in Samaria, there's a couple hundred Samaritans who still live, who still sacrifice animals. They sort of have this weird religion. They have so inbred with themselves that, there's just lots of issues and a problem, but they're still there today. Kind of interesting. But it all begins right here with the deportation of the people. So I'm going to let you read the rest of that chapter by yourself. Let's go to chapter 18. Because it is a breath of fresh air. We have Hezekiah, the most exciting time period in Judah's history. Since King David, this is the best king that there is. Now it came to pass in the 3rd year of Hoshea, the king of Elah, the king of Israel, that Hezekiah, the son of Ahaz, king of Judah, began to reign. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. And again, my friends, more than once, his mother's name is mentioned. And I'm telling you, the reason why his mother's name is mentioned, she was the godly influence in his life. His mother's name was Abi, the daughter of Zechariah, who was a wonderful prophet of God. He did what was right in the sight of the Lord according to all that his father David had done. He removed the high places and broke the sacred pillars, cut down the wooden images. And again, these were all filthy objects. And he broke in pieces the bronze serpent that Moses had made. For until those days, the children of Israel burned incense to it and called it Nehushtan. Back in the book of Numbers, Moses was instructed by God in Numbers chapter 21, verse number 9. So Moses made a bronze serpent and put it on a pole. So it was that if a serpent had bitten anyone, when he looked at the bronze serpent, he lived. In a few weeks, I'm going to be on Mount Nebo in what is present-day Jordan today. Mount Nebo is on the other side of the Jordan River. It is from there that Moses saw the promised land. He was not able to go in. But Moses had made this staff, and then he put a bronze serpent on it. Brass is always a symbol of judgment. And anyone who looked to that was healed. Now, in the New Testament, in the Gospel of John chapter 3, just as Moses lifted up the brass serpent, so must Jesus be lifted up on the cross, and whosoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. But my friends, it's so easy for us to want to worship a thing instead of worshiping the living God. Now today, does a serpent on a staff, does that ring a bell to anyone? What's it a symbol of? It's a symbol of our medical field. So many things we just look at and never really stop to think, well, where did that come from? It came from this, the healing of the Lord. And so people were worshiping and burning incense in front of this serpent and this brass pole. So Hezekiah destroys it. When you go to Israel with me, we see things Hezekiah built. Because here's what ended up happening. That Assyrian army that had already conquered Israel, who had conquered every kingdom it had come against, would now come against Judah. And because of that, Hezekiah knows he has to secure the water source for the city of Jerusalem. Because just like Samaria, the capital of Israel, was on this great mountaintop. I've been there once in my life. It is a steep mountain up. 3 years the Assyrians went around that until they basically starved them out and they had to surrender to them. So Jerusalem was getting ready for this type of siege. And Hezekiah knew he had to have water. So through solid rock for 5 football fields, starting on opposite ends, they dig a tunnel. And I've walked through this tunnel many times. It still brings water into the city of Jerusalem. When we go to that, you got to wear a swimming suit in there, and you're going to get water up to your knees. Or if you're shorter than me, a little bit deeper than that. Depends on how much rain they've had. But my friends, this tunnel goes like this, and miraculously it met shovel to shovel and pick to pick. It was a miracle of God because Hezekiah trusted in the Lord, and you can still see it today. Another thing that you can see today from Hezekiah is they've been doing excavations in the old city. They see the foundation of the wall that Hezekiah added during that time of siege. It's amazing that you can still see it. So here is this good king. Look at verse number 5. He trusted in the Lord. Now that's a great epitaph. He trusted in the Lord, God of Israel, so that after him was none like him among all the kings of Judah, nor were any before him. For he held fast to the Lord, for he did not depart from him, but kept his commandments, which the Lord had commanded Moses. The Lord was with him, and he prospered wherever he went. And he rebelled against the king of Assyria and did not serve him. He subdued the Philistines. Again, that's where Gaza is. That's a coastal people. As far as Gaza and its territory, from the watchtower to the fortified city. Now it came to pass in the 4th year of King Hezekiah, which was the 7th year of Hosea, son of Elah, king of Israel, that Shalmaneser, the king of Assyria, came up against Samaria and besieged it. And at the end of 3 years, they took it. And in verse number 11, then the king of Assyria carried Israel away captive to Assyria, and tells where they put them. And here's why. Because they did not obey the voice of the Lord their God, but transgressed his covenant and all that Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded, and they would neither hear them nor do them. And again, my friends, our nation is at a crossroads.